Quiet musical hog. Hello there and welcome to Magic by Design. We're reliving the trauma of saying goodbye to our childhoods this week with a review of Pixar's 11th animated feature, Toy Story 3, first released in 2010. But before we hatch a plan to escape from Sunnyside Daycare, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Ken and I am joined, as always, by my co-host / brother Garrett. Gar, how are you?
I was very startled by you shouting quiet at the very beginning of the podcast. I was like, alright, I'm not even talking, leave me alone.
Yes, I was referring to you, the musical hog.
I am a musical hog. I have been known to be referred to as a musical hog in the past.
How you doing? Good week?
It's been a week.
It has.
I don't think anything really happened.
These weeks come around fast.
We just get to the point at which we record this. Maybe it's a simulation. Maybe everything doesn't happen in the week before. The only thing that really happens is us recording this podcast, which is the reason it feels like we get around to here every Sunday in like 2 minutes.
Or maybe it's the highlight of our week, so we look forward to it a lot.
Of course, we love talking to our wonderful Magic by Design listeners. Do our Magic by Design listeners have names? Magicians? Designers? Disneyphiles?
Designer magicians?
Yeah, that's the best kind of magician.
Not too bad.
They wear fancy suits.
And do magic.
With fancy suits.
Yeah.
Of cards.
This riff isn't really going anywhere, is it?
Suits and suits of cards.
Ah, I gotcha.
Wordplay.
Good try.
You were shouting down our bit while I was doing wonderful wordplay, and that's very upsetting to me, Ken.
Gar, the bit wasn't working out.
You're not working out. I'm going to replace you as co-host.
With who?
Some kind of bird.
Some kind of bird?
From the back garden. We have a lot of birds in the back garden. I can just drag one in here and you can be like, squawk! And then you're like, yeah, good point.
The experience would probably be the same.
Yeah.
So you self-burned me before you could do it. Gar, it's been a while since I saw Toy Story 3. I know I've seen it more than once.
I don't think I have seen it more than once. I know
Really?
we saw it in the cinema in 2010.
We did.
And I don't think I've seen it in its entirety since. I think I've seen bits and pieces when it was on TV, but I don't think I've seen it all since I originally saw it in the theatres.
No desire to go back there?
No. Obviously, the trauma it caused me is far too deep for me to actually revisit. The existential dread it caused, the lack of purpose that these toys have resonated so deeply with me that I could not watch it again.
So it took you about 11 years to watch it again?
Until you forced me. You tied me to this chair and you were like, watch it! Watch it! And I'm like, what
I held your eyes open like a clockwork orange.
Just like we held you to that chair to watch Hocus Pocus and as you freaked out at the bones crackling. Revenge. You got revenge on me after all these years.
Yes. Toy Story 3 is directed by Lee Unkrich, the editor of the first two films and the co-director of Toy Story 2. It's written by Michael Arndt, while Unkrich wrote the story with John Lasseter and Andrew Stanton, respectively, director and co-writer of the first two films. As we know, Gar, if you've listened to the previous Toy Story episodes, according to the terms of Pixar's initial 7-film deal with Disney, all of the characters created by Pixar for their films were owned by Disney. Furthermore, Disney retained the rights to make sequels for any Pixar film, though Pixar retained the right of first refusal to work on these sequels. So, with Toy Story 2, they tried to make it without Pixar because they had a bit of a dispute.
Then failed, and then Pixar were like, fine, we'll do it, and then they made a masterpiece.
Guess what, Gar? In 2004, they tried again.
God damn it.
When contentious negotiations between the two companies made a split appear likely, Michael Eisner, Disney chairman at the time, put plans in motion to produce Toy Story 3 at a new Disney studio called Circle 7 Animation.
Why do they keep doing this? They're like 3 years away from owning Pixar and they're still trying to screw Pixar over.
Ideas for the non-Pixar sequel included a murder mystery style whodunit and a storyline where all the Buzz Lightyears were recalled due to a fault, and the gang set out to rescue Buzz, fearing his destruction. This actually entered development. Some of the artwork exists online.
Yeah, those feel like shorts more than they feel like full films, don't they? Because there's been a lot of Toy Story shorts since, and some of them are actually very good. And that's what that feels like. They don't feel like fully featured ideas. It's like Buzz is recalled, and it's like a typical, we have to go save Buzz. And like all these films are basically, we have to go save X, you know?
Yeah.
Like Buzz and Woody get taken away to Pizza Planet, or Woody gets taken away to Al's Toy Barn, and in this one there's the whole Sunnyside Daycare. It's always like, we're trapped here, we need to escape. So it's like Buzz is recalled, we go say Buzz isn't really out of the realms of possibility for a Toy Story plot.
It's in the formula that they've laid out for us. In January 2006, Disney bought Pixar in a deal that made Pixar chiefs Edwin Catmull and John Lasseter head of Disney Animation.
Do you think they just walked in and they were like, hey, that Toy Story 3 project? Just the little throat slitting motion. It's like, gone.
Shortly afterwards, Circle 7 Animation was shut down.
They got their ultimate revenge. It's like, you're going to come in, start a studio to try and make our Toy Story movie, huh? Huh? well, we're going to be put in charge of the goddamn studio when this merger happens, and we're going to cancel the studio.
Needless to say, its alternate version of Toy Story 3 was cancelled. The following month, Disney CEO Robert Iger confirmed that Disney was in the process of transferring the production to Pixar. No trace of the Circle 7 story exists in the film that we see today.
I don't know. I think Woody's in it.
Well, in terms of the in terms of the story, the Pixar team didn't even read the script that they wrote. They said it wasn't out of spite; it was more out of...
That's out of spite, though. That's 100% out of spite. Don't you tell me that's not out of spite. Didn't even read it. It could have been the best thing they've ever done. They could have sat down, like somebody's there. It's like, oh god, this is amazing.
Burn it. Toy Story 3 was released in June 2010 to widespread critical acclaim and financial success, and it also spawned a further sequel.
Yeah, because the interesting thing about the Toy Story series is basically the ages at which Andy is, like, perfectly lines up with the ages of my life.
Yeah, more or less for me as well. I know it was a bit older.
You were already in college by this time this movie came out.
It still hit me, Gar.
This movie came out in the summer of 2010, which is when I finished secondary school, and the summer in which I was waiting to go to college. So it's like, it's so perfectly lined up with my life that's like, oh, Toy Story is just made for me, isn't it? Selfishly, like the whole main character syndrome. It's like the entire world revolves around me. This entire franchise is metaphor about my life. Never mind Andy.
Yeah, I think a lot of people felt like that, and that's 15 years of investing in these characters and following their story.
And it's very similar, I think, to the Harry Potter movies and the way those were designed, or the books in particular, not to talk about He Who Shall Not Be Renamed. But like those books were designed to grow up with the reader, they start very happy children's books, and by the end they're kind of grim adult, or young adult books. They're not adult, they're not that mature, there's not that much going on in them. But the movies follow the exact same pattern. And this is quite similar in that it's almost designed to grow up with the people who watched Toy Story as children, and Toy Story 2 as children, so that by the time you get to Toy Story 3, about this story of finding purpose after your purpose is gone, and letting your childhood go and moving on to something else, it's just like, yeah, we're just going to hit you right in the gut with that, aren't we?
And if you think about it, if Disney had not bought Pixar, we wouldn't have had that full circle trilogy, would we?
No, they would have just made a nice little heist movie where there's a whodunit and like one of Bo Peep's sheep has been murdered, and it turns out it was an alternate version of Buzz that killed it. Yeah. It's like, my god.
Spanish Buzz.
You said no trace of it showed up in the script.
There's not a huge amount to say here about the animation, but there are some interesting notes here. And
it sure looks like Toy Story.
It does. It's Toy Story, but if you go from the first one to now, it's just the highly polished Pixar animation we've come to know.
There is one very good animation touch I really, really like, which is the way they animate Sunnyside Daycare.
Yes.
Where it's like, the start of it, it's all like these like nice oranges. It looks very pleasant and welcoming. It's this wonderful place. And then when they open the doors to the preschool kids, they like stark shift to this like bright white lighting. Like it's basically a horror movie. That's what they're switching to. That's what they're telling you. That this horrible scene where these monstrous children come along and paint the toys and throw them against the wall and step on them. It's just the worst thing you've ever seen. And the way they light that scene versus the way they lit the scene beforehand, where it's like, oh, this is this perfect idyllic world. Very good stuff.
Yeah. Again, we've seen that in WALL-E and we see it in Up as well. They're using light and colour to cue our emotions. During the initial development stages of the film, Pixar revisited their work from the original Toy Story films and found that although they could open the old computer files for the 3D models, there was error messages preventing them from editing the files, leading them to recreating the models from scratch. You can see that though, because they are the same but different. They're a bit more rounded, polished.
And, like, fair enough, they could have touched up the models, but realistically, rebuilding them from scratch is probably necessary in 2010.
Yeah.
Like, even if they could open them and import them to whatever software they're using, they're probably like, oh, God, we have to do a lot of work on these anyway, so...
They look a lot more like plastic to me now, like, that kind of vinyl look.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what happens, though, isn't it? You get the fidelity of the material coming through more, the better the animation gets, as opposed to, like, they're plastic blobs. It's like, yeah, and it works. But then the further along they get, it's like, oh, you can see the fibers on the shirts, and you can see the sheen of the plastic.
One of the things that really impresses me through this series, this is more apparent to me in Toy Story 4, but I love how the toys retain the marks of their previous adventures in these films.
Except the thing on Woody's head.
Yeah, that was a bit of an oversight. And there was a perfect out there as well for the guy to repair it. Lotso, for example, he looks like that grubby, worse for wear teddy bear we all have.
Yeah, his fur is kind of matted and it's full of dirt. Their animation is really good. Shock of all shocks, Pixar can animate things very well.
Yeah, and I know they clean them at the end of the film, but they still retain the scuffs and scratches of a toy that's been thrown around the place.
Yeah, and like my favorite part of Toy Story, well, not my favorite part, but one of my favorite animation notes was seeing in Toy Story 2, seeing the two Buzz Lightyears next to each other, the new Buzz and the kind of scuffed and worn and not quite discolored Buzz, but the whites weren't quite as shining. You know, they had seen years.
One of the more impressive sequences was the climax with the junkyard.
Mm-hmm.
To create the chaotic and complex junkyard scene near the film's end, more than a year and a half was invested in research and development to create the simulation systems required for the sequence. So there's a lot going on there with the machinery, and the bit in the incinerator is quite a lot of detail in that.
Yeah, and because there's a scene where they go through like a shredder, and all the little bits of trash are shredded into small, tiny bits of trash. So that you see, like, literally thousands and probably hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of tiny bits of trash while they're standing there in that incinerator waiting for their doom. And, like, that's one of those just level of detail where it's just like, we could just not have that much trash in the incinerator and no one would care, you know? If it was big bits of trash that are easier to animate instead of having those tiny little specks, all of which I assume they did some kind of computer automation or replication of those. I assume they didn't hand animate every single tiny little speck, but still that they're like, yeah, we're going to do it that way anyway. It's probably more work, but it looks cooler.
It does have a great sense of scale, though. And I know the thing is, though, like, it's probably smaller than it seems because the toys, obviously, it seems big compared to them. But yeah, it does create a sense of menace and tension in the final scene. We'll talk about that later. Another interesting note here, Garrett, the film's art director, Daisuke Tsutsumi, is married to Hayao Miyazaki's niece, who originally inspired the character of Mei in Miyazaki's anime My Neighbor Totoro, 1988. Totoro makes a cameo appearance in Toy Story 3 as one of Bonnie's toys, and I never tweaked it before for some reason.
Yeah, and you forget that like the majority of the toys in these movies are licensed.
Yes.
Which is a thing you would forget because like and a lot of them are American toys, and some of them came over here, like particularly like we had Potato Head, we had those kind of things. Yeah, so it makes sense that they'd have other licensed toys from other countries.
True. You have Fisher-Price, you have Mattel. You had an interesting comment there, Gar, where all the toys get thrown in the trash to lead to the climax, but the Barbie toys weren't.
Yeah, and if you think about through the entire film, the Barbie toy is entirely unscathed.
Yeah.
You know, the point at which all the preschool kids trash everything, she gets dragged out by Ken. And the point at which they're all about to be thrown into the bin, she gets dragged out by Ken. So I legitimately do think that Mattel are like, they looked at the script, it's like, we don't rough up Barbie.
Barbie is pristine.
That doesn't work for us. You don't paint Barbie. You don't throw Barbie in the trash. We've got to protect our brand equity. We got to protect the image of Barbie. So you do not do these things to Barbie. And like, I tried to Google to see was there any controversy about Barbie, and I couldn't find any stories. But watching this film where she is conveniently, like very conveniently dragged away anytime any of the toys are like beaten up or trashed or painted or thrown in the bin or anything like that. Like the Barbie toy is very conveniently dragged away to the side. So it really does make me think that Mattel are like, this is what you can do with Barbie. And more importantly, this is what you can't do with Barbie.
Yeah, even when Molly gives away Barbie, she's not put in a trash bag like Andy's toy. She's put in a box.
Yeah, it's like everything is like, we've got to protect the brand image of Barbie.
I don't think that is something that's common knowledge, but you can't infer it from watching the film. I think you're right.
Yeah. It's like both times, like it's very weird at the end of the movie when all the toys are about to be pushed into the bin. Ken does just randomly grab her. It's like no, and fair enough, we find that she's in Sunnyside at the end of the movie. But yeah, it's very weird how she is conveniently dragged away every time the toys are about to be trashed in some way. Mattel, big corporate standards, ruining our animation. We want to see disfigured Barbie. I wanted Barbie to lose an arm. Really establish the stakes.
No, nobody touches Barbie. Moving on here to the story, Garrett, we have a montage opening where we see Andy grow up.
It's so good. I've watched it like 4 times since I watched the movie and then cried a little.
Yeah, You've Got a Friend in Me never fails to hit me in the feels. But yeah, it's a perfect way to open the movie because you're like, okay, if we're telling the story of Andy growing up and moving on, how do we open the film? I know they open it with the play sequence, which is fun.
Yeah.
You know, I always love those ones where we see what it looks like in his head, but then we get onto the montage and it's just wonderful. I like the way they have that old 90s style video camera, and they even use the older character models in that part, but then you see the newer character models in the later part, of course.
There's some nice gags where Andy's mom is like, Does the red light mean it's on? He doesn't know how video cameras work. But yeah, just to establish that he has had a lifetime of playing with these toys. You know, we saw 2 movies. The second movie isn't particularly Andy focused, as opposed to the first one, which kind of is. So we needed to see a lifetime of Andy playing with and loving these toys, and how important they were to him, and how he grew up with them, and how over time they faded into the background, as all toys do. As we learned in Toy Story 2 from Jesse's story, that eventually the toys do go away. Eventually the toys are discarded, and that is a deeply difficult thing to deal with for sentient toys.
That's interesting because there's life for these toys, but there's different scenarios. Like our lives would go in different directions, and some of them are more favourable, some of them aren't. Like the daycare in the right setting can be great, except when you're with the toddlers who don't have any mass in toys and they don't understand how to respect their property or
anything
that's not theirs.
They just literally trash everything they come across, like monsters.
Obviously, the worst case scenarios we see in the end is the dump. That's like hell for them, essentially. And then, the best case scenario is either the attic, where they might be dug up someday, or even better, being re-gifted to another child.
Whether it's a younger sibling, or whether it's given in a donation box and bought by somebody else, or whether it's just being shoved in the attic and never seen again. But I even love the scene where they're trying to get Andy to play with them, and like they have the phone scam they're going on with here, where they get the phone, they call the phone, and then he just picks the phone out, drags it out of Rex's cold dead hands, and throws it back in the box.
They're still hatching those elaborate schemes all those years later.
And it's like, look, I knew Operation Phone was a long shot here, but
yeah, they finally ran out of ideas.
Woody's a good leader. You criticize Woody throughout this movie, but Woody's a good leader. He cares about his friends.
He does, but he also kind of gets overridden by his directive. He's not a robot, but his directive is to be Andy's toy and be there for Andy. So,
but even then, multiple times in this movie, like when they're about to go into the attic, and Andy's mom mistakes them for trash and brings them out to like the curb, and Woody could have just stayed in his box. He could have been like, I'm going to college, screw the rest of these toys. No, he tries to help them. Or when they get kids trapped in Sunnyside and they kick him out and they do the typical irrational toy thing where it's like, shut up, Woody, you're wrong, go away, which they do in every movie, and I actually quite like. I find it quite funny that these dumb idiot toys are always stupid.
The mob mentality.
But yeah, even when Woody goes to what's her name's house and meets all the toys and learns the true nature of Sunnyside, he goes back without hesitation. And again, end of the movie, he's sitting in the box for college, perfectly happy. He's gone away with his pal, living forever and living the college lifestyle. He's like, no, I'm going to stay with my friends. I put myself in the box.
No, I think he does the right thing at every juncture.
Over and over again, at the expense of his own happiness, you jerk.
But he does find it hard to let go of Andy.
Of course he does. That's the entire story. But the giving up these things is what the movie is about. Giving up, like, these people all have purpose of some sort. What is to bring joy to Andy. He learns that it's not just Andy you can bring joy to. You can bring joy to, what's the name of that freaking kid? Bonnie, there we go. I was thinking Molly. It's not Molly.
Molly's his sister.
His sister, yes. Bringing joy to Molly will be his new purpose. And then we'll go on to Toy Story 4, where we'll learn, well, maybe purpose of toys is not just to bring joy to children. You can have different purposes throughout your life, that some of which are designed not just to make other people happy, but maybe perhaps make you happy. Yeah, you were giving out about Woody, and I'm like, no, Woody is a good leader who helps his friends at more often than not his own personal cost. And he's trying to rally the troops at the start of the movie when the phone scheme doesn't work. And he's like, I know, guys, but, it'll be fine. We'll go to the attic. The attic will be okay. We'll live up there. And like Buzz is like, you really think that, Woody? I'm like, no, what am I supposed to say?
No, I get it, but he does...
You're the jerk here, Ken, not Woody.
He does go right up to the edge of being selfish quite a few times, is what I'm saying.
And then walks back and goes the other way.
Yeah, but he grows. I am agreeing with you, Gar. One of the notes I have here is, Gar, Buster the dog being old and fat when Woody tries to ride him to the curb is a very good gag, because, he uses Buster in the past to, save other toys, etc.
Yeah, when Wheezy is being donated, he runs Buster down the steps of the stairs to try and save him, but yeah, Buster just slowly waddles into the room when he jumps in his back. He's like, oh, this is gonna work, and
then he just flops over. Very good. There are a number of really great performances in this movie as well, Gar, including some new characters. Michael Keaton as Ken, and I also love Timothy Dalton as Mr. Pricklepants.
Mr. Pricklepants is great because he's like, I'm a toy, but I'm an actor. Everything I'm doing is a role.
What's my motivation? I love that. But, we also have Jodie Benson playing Barbie, who played Ariel in The Little Mermaid.
And you can hear it if you listen.
Yeah. It's got the the cadence, it's almost identical in some ways.
Well, it's her voice, so yes.
Yeah, but I'll take it. But a lot of great performances, and there can be a drawback. They succeed in Toy Story 2 adding these new characters, but then when you're trying to add more new characters and they do it again in the fourth one, they can sometimes be hit and miss. But I enjoyed most of the new characters in this film.
Yeah, and they introduce some that don't really have a ton of big role. Like, all of Bonnie's toys are only there briefly, so we'll see more of them in Toy Story 4, I suppose. But I do still have the issue, Ken. They don't know what to do with Buzz Lightyear.
No.
Like, these are Woody stories, increasingly. Like, the first film was a Buzz and Woody story, but then all the other three are Woody stories. Because they have like, depth to Woody. They understand, like, Woody's role here and what makes Woody interesting. But Buzz, they're just, like, comic relief, I guess? They're like, what can we do with Buzz in this movie? And they're just like, comic relief. He
gets reset and he goes back to his old ways, and they're all like, oh, here we go again. And then he becomes Spanish Buzz. But could you see things becoming modelled if they tried to have big arcs for both of them?
Yeah, it probably makes the film better that they do, like, sideline Buzz, the secondary character. Like, he's on the Ham level now, where he's just like, he's there for some plot propulsion and some bits, and he's not really there to be a meaningful character in the movie, other than, like, his friendship with Woody is still kind of an important part. Like, there's the scene where Woody doesn't shake his hand at the start of the movie, and then he does shake his hand at the end of the movie. It's like, oh, that's a nice little narrative thread there. But yeah, they don't really know what to do with Buzz. It's interesting that this Buzz Lightyear character, they realize is not that deep. So of course they're making a live action movie about him.
Well, about the person who inspired the toy, apparently.
Buzz, yeah, which is stupid, but it might be good. Who knows?
Mr. Raphead Gar is truly terrifying. Yeah. Truly terrifying. The stuff of nightmares, second only to Daisy's dolly.
Mr. Potato Head. Trying to work pitta and potato into the same word.
Yes.
It's a very good bit that he injects himself into that wrap and then he adds himself to a pickle later, so he's the original Pickle Rick.
Well, it's actually a cucumber, so...
Shush, don't you ruin my joke with facts.
A pickle is created through the process of pickling.
The Lotso character, Ken.
Yes, I was going to go to that next. Him as a villain.
Prospector.
Yeah, I was going to say that. It came into my head, like, the characters are pretty identical.
They're the same character. Especially even the way they set it up. It's like, oh, he's the caring old man who guides all these people safely through the world. But no, he's selfish and out for his own interests. Though I do like the fact that Lotso goes a step further and he's like a full-on dictator.
Yeah, he's been so warped by the perceived betrayal of his child that he has to control everything. And he literally rigged the system and he's at the top of it. He's like a crooked warden in a prison. I think that's the analogy there,
Yeah, and he's guarding the halls. He has, like, searchlights out at night in case any of these toys step out of line or try to get out or try to break the prison caste system that he's set up.
I do think, though, the Prospector is selfish and desperate, where Lotso, he's truly evil and calculating. Like, he's a couple of steps ahead at all times, and he does some really callous things.
Yeah, I guess, Prospector just wants to go to that nice museum and live his happy life. Whereas, like, as you said, Lotso is actively making a lot of people's lives worse.
For his own betterment.
Yeah, like if Woody was perfectly happy to go along with Prospector would have never tried to attack him with his pickaxe,
Yeah.
As opposed to Lotso, who sent them to the wolves to be eaten by the children, so...
And even when he seems to be redeemed, when the gang save him from being... Chopped up or...
Into tiny...
What's the word for that?
Shredded?
Shredded, that's the word, yes. He gets away, and then he has the power to help them by stopping the machine, and he just goes, so long, suckers.
Yeah, out of pure spite as well. It's just like, yeah, you go meet your friend now. In hell.
Yeah, literally there's no reason for that at all.
Just to be a dick. That's the only reason.
To that point, I love how these films make the mundane to us high stakes. Like I said earlier, the dump is just a dump, but to the toys, that's the worst possible fate.
Well, to be fair, if you were sitting on that conveyor belt about to be going toward a shredder, you'd be like, oh god.
Yeah. Well, in fairness...
Or sliding down a giant hill into a frickin' incinerator about to be burned alive. This would be hell to us too, Ken, not just toys.
I know, but, like, if you go to the dump, you just go like, oh yeah, it's the dump. But to them, like, it's
the final resting place of toys. It's the desperate end to which toys reach.
Kind of like a graveyard for us in some ways.
Yeah.
Ugh. Speaking of the incinerator part, Gar, that gets me hook, line and sinker every time.
Yeah, the way they stand there and accept their fate, and they're there together as friends, and they're there to support each other in this final moment of their lives as they're about to be burned to death before they are saved. Which a very good payoff, by the way, with the aliens swooping in at the last minute with the claw. And payoff a 3-film narrative arc, the little bit about the claw.
Yeah, I mean, that bit is just a throwaway bit, but it becomes important in this film, which is funny.
Yeah, but seeing these characters, they're just going to accept their fate together as one.
That's some really adult stuff. And the thing is, as well, like, their instinct is to try one more stand, because, like, you know, they've been through these films, like, they've had adventures, and it always works out in the end, and they always try to the very end. And then just to see them accept that maybe this is it this time, that they aren't going to get out of it.
They're going to go out together.
I genuinely thought, because they've made some brave choices.
You thought they were going to burn the toys?
For a minute there, I thought they might, because, you know...
What kind of ending would that be?
I get it, but in my heart of hearts, I knew it would be alright, but there was a moment where they had me.
Listen, Pixar makes some bold choices, but burning Woody alive was never going to be one of them.
Yeah, I thought they might lose at least one of them.
Who would you shove down?
Buzz, obviously, we just discussed it.
Yeah, and he's plastic, he might survive. No, he wouldn't.
No, he would not. But yeah, the bit with the claw is very funny, because, as you said, it's kind of a throwaway gag that's there for the entire 3 films, but then it ends up saving all of them.
And it turns the aliens into, as you mentioned, like, they're always a throwaway gag. It's like they're just a one-line gag. It's like, oh, you saved our lives, we're eternally grateful. Huh, that's funny. But then they make that meaningful, and they give it a payoff in the 3rd movie, which is like, that's just good filmmaking.
Yeah, how do they know that they were in there, though?
Because they're aliens, and they're there to help. There was a window.
Okay. Lucky they grabbed all of them. Imagine one of them just got left behind. They just missed it with the claw.
It's like, oh, go back. Oh, sorry, Mrs. Potato Head, bye.
But then again, they lived in the claw machine for years, so they're very good at the claw.
I did like, actually, we haven't mentioned this, at the start of the film when they show, like, how many toys it's down to. And when you think about that, like, there's an element of loss there.
There is, because, like, I was going through my head, as you said, Etch is gone, the spell machine, the wrestler, Orv is gone.
Yeah, obviously Bo Peep is the big one that's gone that we'll come back to in the next movie. Wheezy is gone. And like the big thing was saving Wheezy, and Wheezy's just gone. All like as you think about how these characters have been whittled down over the years, even like the movie starts with the army men being like, our sentence has been served, Captain, we're off.
We're the first one to go in the trash.
And it's, you know, when you think, and that's not a thing they dwell on, but it's a thing that they do. I think there's a shot where they just show how few of them there are left.
Yeah, because he calls a staff meeting. He's like, gather around for a staff meeting. He's like, we are all here.
Yeah, and it's just, they don't dwell on the fact that they have in fact lost all of these people through the years, but they have. And there's probably an element of grief and sadness there, and that are they next?
I think there's a reference to the fact that Woody believes that they've all been donated and have new lives with new kids. And you do sense an element of denial there. That maybe some of these toys just simply did end up in the dump, unfortunately.
Yeah, they got thrown out, or they got lost, or they got, broken through the years. Like, this film is, 10 years later, give or take? Andy's 17 in this. He's probably about 7 in the other film, right?
Sure.
So it's about 10 years later, and all these toys through the years, just gone.
Sad. Jim Varney, of course, died in 2000, 10 years before this film was made. They replaced him with a friend of his, whose name escapes me at the moment.
Blake Clark.
That's it. But the performance is uncanny.
Yeah,
like,
you wouldn't know.
You wouldn't notice at all.
I like, to the degree that I thought they just did the thing where they use stock footage, because obviously
it's not footage, Garrett. It's audio.
Stock audio, whatever. Because I know they used that for the Up show, didn't they?
They did for Russell.
Or they just dragged some audio lines out and made it work.
I did not notice that.
Yeah.
Lastly, Garrett, that ending just rips my heart out every time. But the last playtime is the perfect end to the trilogy.
It's so nice on so many levels. Like, first of all, again, that Woody is like, all right, instead of these toys going in the attic, I know, like, this Bonnie home is a good home. So I'm going to make sure my friends go to a good home. Which, again, good leader, Ken. You'd question him, Woody. So he makes sure that they're donated to that home. And then, as you mentioned, the scene where again, Bonnie is very tentative and scared. And Andy, like, breaks the ice with toys and then plays with the toys, introduces all the toys, and talks about how meaningful all these toys are and how he still remembers all the toys' characters. And, like, it goes back to the opening scene of the movie, which I think is a ton of fun, where they do, like, the giant playtime scene where it's a dramatic rendering of his train escape with the evil Dr. Ham and death by monkeys and all that fun stuff, and how they like children's imaginations are so much better than us dumb adults who have our imaginations beaten out of us, and we're not meant to be smart or funny or interesting, as opposed to kids. It's just like the whole world is that to them.
And like, it's just like a kid as well to make something that's not a toy essentially into a toy. So like, it's a piggy bank, it's there to save your money, but he made it into a toy, and it was always the villain in all his games, which is fun. And it's a really fun juxtaposition as well, because Ham's not like that.
Yeah.
Ham's like basically kind of he sounds like a middle-aged schlub. John Ratzenberger, essentially.
And I even like when they cut to the quote-unquote live-action part of that scene,
Yeah.
with the real-world setting, when Molly wanders in and knocks over the train tracks. He's like, no, let's go with it. Molly's a 50-foot alien from space.
Yeah. And, it just reminds me of what it was like when I was a kid, because I had all those same kind of games, and I used things for toys that weren't toys, and I had that imagination. So it's just... That's why it kind of hits you really hard, because, as you said, Gar, it parallels with your life so much.
Yeah, and everyone had this experience where they threw out their childhood toys. Everyone had the moment where you had your Batman figures and your Gandalf figures, or if you're a man-child, you still have them all. I don't, but...
You still have some of them, though.
Yeah, there's some probably lying around. I still have all my old wrestlers. They're under your desk in the room, aren't they?
Somewhere, yeah.
Yeah, but everyone can relate to that. Everyone can relate to that feeling of letting your childhood go, letting those things go. And sometimes it's okay if you don't. You know? If that's important to you, if that's meaningful to you, if that makes your life better, you don't have to let it go.
Yeah, we've discussed this throughout the podcast, Gar. There is this thing about adulthood, about having to let go of childish things as we hear children playing in the background. Hopefully that comes through. That's quite appropriate for what we're talking about right now.
This is the audio design you get in this podcast.
But part of being happy as an adult for me is holding on to some of that stuff. And that's why we see kind of a movement in our generation to say, like, no, I'm an adult and I'll pay my taxes and I'll pay my bills. But yeah, I'm going to collect toys. Why not?
I don't have to sit down and read Ulysses every day. You can't make me.
Yeah, I'm going to play games. I'm going to buy figurines, I'm
not going to read War and Peace and think about financial data. It's not going to be my life. You leave me alone. But yeah, that final scene where Andy and Woody both realize they have to move on. Like, there is the wonderful moment where he finds Woody in the box, he picks Woody up, and he clutches him back toward itself when Bonnie reaches out to him. He's like, can he let that go? Can he let that moment of his life go? And Woody's the same. Like, Woody was sitting in the college box watching his friends being donated before he obviously ran out and threw himself into the other box, which again, no one saw him do, which is quite impressive. But like that moment where both Andy and Woody look at each other and realize both have to move on. And that's okay. It's okay that they found new purpose and new joy in life.
It's smart as well that Woody gets saved by Bonnie at some point, but then goes back for the others, because that's how Bonnie recognizes Woody and instinctively reaches out for him.
Because technically she thinks he's hers.
Yeah. And, that moment of Andy pulling him back, as if,
It's mine. I can't let this go. He's my childhood toy. This is a good movie. And to think that this Disney-owned property about a bunch of toys can tell such an interesting and engaging story about purpose and about existence and about moving on and about abandoning childhood, or not abandoning childhood, but moving past childhood to new things. Like, to think that this story could have ended so badly in, 99, whenever they made Toy Story 2, if Disney had forged on with their version of Toy Story 2. To think it could have been so different in 2004, when Disney wanted to make it their version of Toy Story 3. There's so many ways in which this could have gone wrong, and the ways in which it went right are so good. And like this was the point where you would have had faith in Pixar making sequels. We might not have that next week when we talk about Cars 2, but to this point Pixar have made 2 sequels, Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 3, both of which are masterpieces. Like, you could make a very, very good argument that the Toy Story movies are the best trilogy of all time.
No, for sure. And,
if you include the 4th, I don't think there's been a better collection of 4 movies ever.
Yeah, because normally you have diminishing returns, but I think this is a rare case, up until the 3rd one at least, where each one is better than the other, and including the 4th one, each one is at least as good and has merit.
And tells a satisfying narrative arc across all 4, where they do realize it's like, all right, these are Woody stories. And that's what we focus in on, and everyone else is there for jokes, like Mr. Potato Head being like, I agree with Jessie, she is wrong.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's a great line. Yeah. And you have the bits with Ken, and you have the bits with Barbie manipulating Ken, which is all good fun. Not you, the doll.
You manipulate me, Gar, in this podcast.
Yeah. And you have tons of little jokes throughout the movie that, like, the movie is legitimately funny, and the movie is legitimately interesting, and it has weird body horror like Mr. Frickin' Pita Head over there. And it has the disastrous children destroying and attacking toys scenes that feel different and feel like something they haven't done. It does feel like a Pixar horror movie, which I'd actually be interested to see what a full Pixar horror movie would look like. But
as a child that respected my toys and kept them good and still has a thing about keeping my stuff good, that scene horrifies me.
Yeah. And then when you strip all that away, you get a series that has a through-line narrative arc about purpose and existence that is more interesting and thoughtful than most other movies. So, Toy Story, man. How did they do it so right?
Yeah, especially animation is all about these happy accidents, as we said, when this trilogy could have been so different. And we could have seen more of these films by now if Disney had gotten their way. And I think Pixar are the custodians of this story, and I would have hated to see it lost.
Yeah, and they came back to it again, and they still nailed it. And every time, everyone's like, I don't want them to make another movie. So the last one was perfect. It's like, no, if they have a story to tell, we'll judge that on its merits. You should never be like, you can't make this new thing because the other thing is bad. And if the new thing is bad, the old things are still good. That doesn't take away anything from them. You just pretend they're not there.
Moving on here to the legacy of this film, Gar, there are some notes on the music, but there's nothing much here. Randy Newman's back for the 6th time, and he does compose all the songs and music in this film. We hear variations of his previous work, but there are some wonderful original stuff as well.
Yeah, and it's a good score. It's a good solid score.
This is the 2nd consecutive Pixar film, 3rd overall in terms of animation, to be nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. The film received 4 more Academy Award nominations, including Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Sound Editing, Best Animated Feature, and Best Original Song, winning the latter 2, although I would have made a case for Best Screenplay as well. At the time of its release, with a budget of $200 million, it's one of the most expensive films ever made. It's still the case. The sequel cost the same amount of money as well, the 4th one. And it was also Pixar's highest grossing film at the box office, with takings of $1.067 billion. It's the first animated film to gross over $1 billion.
So much money.
And it was the highest grossing film in the US and worldwide of 2010. To that point, it was the highest grossing animated film of all time. It's been surpassed since by a few movies. It's number 7 on the list currently. But this was a big phenomenon, and it continues. Like Pixar, even though, some people would have liked it to end with the 3rd one, people came back to watch the 4th one.
And the 4th one is worth watching, whether it be How to Train Your Dragon and The Illusionist. I don't know what The Illusionist is, but How to Train Your Dragon, banger. But I would pick Toy Story 3 over it, so...
Yeah, look, I think we summed it up, but, as I said, we followed and invested in these characters for 15 years to the point when we saw the movie. The story of Andy mirrored our own childhoods, and I remember sitting in the theatre multiple times being on the verge of tears, and I didn't cry, I didn't openly weep, but I was finding it hard to see the screen at the end through the tears in my eyes, and it's amazing that a story can do that, and that's why it's nominated for Best Picture, and that's why it has merit, that it gave me that emotional response. And I don't have that with actual live-action films that often.
You can only connect with the toys, can you, Ken? You can't connect with real people?
No.
But yeah, it's like this is the film that other films have done this before this, of course. But these are the films that justify this medium as a medium of art and not a medium of commercialism. Which I've done this rant 7,000 times, Ken. But so many bad studios just view children's entertainment as this commercial thing you churn out and kids buy it, and that sucks. As opposed to these movies, which are art. Legitimate art and very good art,
and you can still sell a buttload of toys.
Yeah, like there's points in this movie that you can view as cynical, where it's just like, oh yeah, we introduced Spanish Buzz, so we can sell Spanish Buzz, and oh yeah, we have all of Bonnie's toys introduced, and we have Lotso introduced, so we can sell the Lotzos, and we can sell. Lotso, I think, was the big one they sold after this movie, if I remember. They have all those characters introduced, so they can sell more toys, and that's fine. But they made art around it, so what can you do?
Alright, cowfolk and space rangers, it's nearly time for us to say goodbye for another week, but fear not, unlike Andy, we will be back. Resident Magic by Design singer Nicole is here in just a few minutes to wrap up a wonderful trilogy with a song from Toy Story 3, but first we need to put away our toys. New episodes of Magic by Design land every Monday, where all magical podcasts are downloaded. Stop by the website at magicbydesign.buzzsprout.com to find a full list of podcast platforms. We are literally everywhere: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, you name it, we're on it. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Come play with us on social media. You can be our friend on Facebook at facebook.com/magicbydesignpod, on Twitter at magicdesignpod, and on Instagram at magicbydesignpod. We always love to see new listeners come to the show, so if you enjoy our weekly Disney discussions, please do leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice. If you don't give us 5 stars, we will send you down for a stretch in the Caterpillar Room, or worst yet, the Sandbox.
Oh no, not the box. And I'm not something you can pull my eyes out and throw it out a hole. Or can I?
Can we remove your eyes and arms and lips and put it onto a wrap?
No, I want to be a pickle.
Okay, pickle car. Next week, we reached the halfway point of our retrospective of Pixar's current film canon with a review of the studio's 12th animated feature, Cars 2.
From a very high to a very low low.
be sure to tune in for that. But until then, stay safe and so long, partner. Now then, we have a treat for you. Here to play us out with the Academy Award winning We Belong Together from Toy Story 3 is Magic by Design's very own Randy Newman, Nicole. Thanks for listening and see you next week.
Turn your back on me, don't you walk away. Don't you tell me that I don't care, 'cause I do. Don't you tell me I'm not the one. Don't you tell me I ain't no fun. Just tell me you love me like I love you. You know you do. When we're together, clear skies are clear, and I share them the way I'm less depressed. And sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, I just can't take it when we're apart. We belong together. We belong together. Yes, we do. You'll be mine forever. We belong together. We belong together. You know it's true. It's gonna stay this way forever. Me and you. If I could really talk to you, if I could find a way, I'm not shy, there's a whole lot I wanna say. Of course there is. Talk about friendship and loyal things. Talk about how much you mean to me. And I'll promise to always be there by your side whenever you need me. The day I met you was the luckiest day of my life, and I bet you feel the same way. At least I hope you do. So don't forget, if the future should take you away,